We all know who Jim Carrey is, and I'm gonna help you understand what each and every one of his movies is like without spoiling anything important. So let me know who you'd be interested in seeing next, like and subscribe, and let's just get right into it, starting with his first movie. Once Bitten is basically about Jim Carrey and his creepy friends being way too horny for their own good. To be clear, his friends are the creeps. Jim Carrey's really just horny because his girlfriend won't sleep with him in a town where literally no one else is so unlucky. So the three friends go to a bar where Jim Carrey meets a MILF who just so happens to be looking for a virgin. So she takes him home, but she doesn't actually want to sleep with him. She's a vampire who needs his one-of-a-kind virgin blood. Yeah, this is a super fun movie. It feels so 80s, and it has a great original soundtrack, except for the title track, which is a good song. It just plays for literally 9 minutes straight the entire time they're at the bar, and then it comes on again just a few scenes later. It's kind of exhausting, but the worst thing about this movie is Jim Carrey's disgusting friends. There's some no good, dirty, rotten horn dogs. And I think the movie would actually be a lot better if the characters were just cut. They try to pick up chicks at a laundromat. But other than that, I do really like this movie. It's got some great vampire jokes and puns. And I think it's pretty amazing how well it utilized Jim Carrey a full decade before other movies knew how to. I mean, they knew he could do faces well enough to script this part in.
Look at your hair even. You look like Jerry Lewis.
I thought it looked more like De Niro, you know?
He literally looks like De Niro during that. Also, I like how all the vampires have their own custom coffins. I think it's a nice touch. If you're like a big 80s movie fan, I don't see how you wouldn't like this movie. Peggy Sue Got Married feels to me like the female-led version of Back to the Future. Peggy Sue is attending her high school reunion where she gets crowned reunion prom queen, making her so overwhelmed she passes out. When she wakes up, she's 25 years in the past, back in high school, and that means she's herself but younger. So unlike Back to the Future, she doesn't have to worry about running into herself. She doesn't really have a mission or reason that she knows of that she's in the past. She's just kind of surviving and trying to be herself and fit in. She's dating Nick Cage, who I actually think does a really good job at being a whiny high school student. His nasally voice is really funny.
3 years is long enough for the music to pan out, which it will. I know it.
Honestly, he does better at it than Jim Carrey, who, to be fair, has a tiny role in this movie of being Nick Cage's friend. Back in the future, Nick Cage and Peggy Sue are getting a divorce because he's been cheating on her. So now in the past, she tries dating a new guy and only realizes it's a mistake when he starts planning their future, in which she will move back to Utah with him and become one of his polygamous wives. This movie's pretty good. There's some really funny jokes and some cool ideas. Honestly, I don't see that much reason to watch it over Back to the Future, unless you're in the mood for a romance, I guess. The Deadpool is a Clint Eastwood movie. It's actually the 5th and final movie of the Dirty Harry Callahan series, so I didn't really know what was going on. I've never seen a Clint Eastwood movie, and I almost didn't include this because Jim Carrey dies 15 minutes into the movie. But it's more than just a cameo. He's a main character that gets referenced after his death, and I kind of love his role despite how small it is. He's a rock star named Johnny Squares working on a movie set with Liam Neeson where he's the first to get whacked in a string of serial killings that Clint Eastwood then solves. Earth Girls Are Easy opens up with this really cool, old-school animated title sequence. The movie is about Gina Davis, who's sexually frustrated because her soon-to-be husband won't sleep with her. So she gets herself a makeover, hoping to seduce him, and catches him cheating when he doesn't recognize her. She kicks him out where their old lady neighbor has been trying to eavesdrop, leading to maybe the most unhinged 10 seconds I've ever witnessed.
Go to bed, Mrs. Murky.
That drops us into the second musical number, which there are a bunch of. It's like a musical romantic comedy. Just like Once Bitten was, this movie is basically just about Jim Carrey being horny. He's just an alien instead of a vampire. He's a fuzzy red alien that loves the hairless bodies of Earth girls. So his blue and yellow friends join him on Earth. We're lucky enough the women also love them. They are taken to the beauty salon and given extreme alien makeovers where yellow and blue are revealed to be Damon Wayans.
Oh my god, you're like totally black.
And Jeff Goldblum, which for some reason I didn't see coming, even though their names are in the credits. Jeff Goldblum is the only one that acts normal for some reason. The other two can talk, but mostly just make sounds. The movie's basically them picking up girls and Gina Davis trying to resist Jeff Goldblum's alien charms.
I just don't want you to think Earth girls are easy.
Yeah, I enjoy this stupid movie. It's one of those ones that's so bad, it's actually kind of good. Doing Time on Maple Drive is a soapy, overly dramatic Fox TV movie. It's about a family with abusive parents that kinda can't accept the fact that they hate their kids. Jim Carrey is the oldest son, and his dad hates him because he likes alcohol. They call him an alcoholic and treat him like he's one, but that doesn't really seem like the case.
And I'm some kind of criminal because I want to drink in the afternoon.
Jim Carrey's sister and her husband are too scared of their dad to get pregnant, even though they just want to have a kid. And the youngest brother, the family golden boy, is introducing his fiance to the family. He gets weird about kissing her, though.
I'm sorry. This is making you uncomfortable, isn't it?
What?
So she snoops around his room and finds a letter from an ex-boyfriend. So she breaks up with him and he begs her that he's trying not to be gay anymore. She leaves, but he can't admit the truth to his family, saying that she'll be back soon. And he keeps up that lie up until his bachelor party, that he leaves early to try and take his own life. But he survives, and his ex-fiancée sends a letter to the family with the truth. So he explains to his family that he drove into a pole because that's easier than coming out to his mom and dad. And he's kinda right. They just yell at him, get mad he drove into the pole, and even tell him he needs to call his ex-fiancée to get her back. Yeah, they're just terrible. The only kind of step made is his father saying, "It might be alright that you're gay because Alexander the Great was gay." I like when Jim Carrey sticks up for his brother here.
Just leave him alone.
Yeah, he doesn't really do much in this movie other than be an alcoholic. It really doesn't play to any of his strengths. So speaking of TV movies, real quick, I want to go over Rubberface and Copper Mountain, which are the first two movies Jim Carrey ever starred in. Rubberface in 1981, Copper Mountain in 1983, and they're both Canadian TV movies that are both under an hour long, and I also didn't want to start the video off with them because they just suck. They're barely movies. He also starred in something before these called The Sex and Violence Family Hour. Anyways, from this point on, you're actually going to start recognizing the movies, starting with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective is a movie where the concept is much better than the execution. The idea of a private detective that investigates pet mysteries is really awesome, but actually somehow Jim Carrey himself is the only interesting part of this movie. This was the first movie of his to come out in 1994, which is just an unbelievable year for Jim Carrey, for any actor. He had Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, three legitimate classic movies all in the same year. So yeah, while I do consider this movie a classic, and I watched it a lot growing up, it's mostly just forgettable, including the plot. Jim Carrey is hired to find the Miami Dolphins' missing halftime show Dolphin, leading him on a wild search of all the players on the team, discovering an ex-player who wants to get revenge on the team, specifically on Dan Marino. Jim Carrey returns to the police chief to tell her the news, and she starts making out with him. All that's left now is to find the ex-player that wants revenge, so Jim Carrey goes sleuthing, and this is my favorite part of the whole movie, I think. Then Jim Carrey finds out the missing player actually is the police chief that made out with him, who was so hell-bent on revenge he became a woman, and Jim Carrey's so disgusted he has to clean himself. I think this is the first movie so far that's truly elevated because of Jim Carrey being in it, but I still don't think it's very good. But there are a few funny scenes, and I do really like the soundtrack. Chill detective music goes hard. The Mask still holds up in every way. It's wildly entertaining, it's nostalgic, it's romantic, it's smart, it's funny. It really has everything. Some parts of it even scared me a lot as a kid. Jim Carrey finds an ancient mask that once belonged to Loki, the trickster god of the night. And putting the mask on transforms Jim Carrey into a wacky cartoon superhero villain of sorts. I love that even though we get to know Stanley Ipkiss and how good of a guy he is, once he puts the mask on, he still doesn't really use his powers for good. No, he just wants the girl that he's been lusting after. So he robs a bank and then gets himself dancing on stage with her at a nightclub. I've always loved this weird newspaper room set. It gives me strange, nostalgic vibes. And Stanley Ipkiss's cool retro 90s apartment. Jim Carrey is perfect for this role. He's made for it. This is the kind of movie with classic scene after classic scene. I love the cops dancing. I love everything to do with him going to jail and escaping because of his dog. Seriously, if you somehow haven't seen it, just go watch it. Honestly, I thought I was gonna hate Dumb and Dumber. I never liked it as a kid. I never understood why everyone else seemed to think it was so funny. Alas, rewatching this, I see how wrong I was. Actually, now I don't even understand what I thought was so unfunny, because this movie is hilarious. Jim Carrey and his best friend roommate are dumb losers. That's pretty much all you need to know. It actually reminds me a lot of Step Brothers, but this is way funnier. Limo driver Jim Carrey falls in love with the woman he's bringing to the airport, and she leaves her briefcase behind. So this begins his quest of following her to Colorado to return it, unaware that she left it there on purpose for some mobsters to pick up. I'm kind of unclear on why, but I don't really care. So the whole road trip to Colorado, they're being hunted, and their stupidity continuously gets them into trouble and then right back out of it. Like when they get pulled over for having open bottles of alcohol, but they were really just peeing in them. And of course the cop doesn't believe them. Remember this cop, actually. I'll be bringing him up in a later movie. One of my favorite parts of the movie is this interaction with the gloves.
I can't feel my fingers anymore. They're numb.
Maybe you should wear these extra gloves. My hands are starting to get sweaty.
Extra gloves? This whole time?
Yeah, we're in the Rockies.
Also, the wardrobe department killed it. The costuming is so entertaining all movie. This is just a fantastic comedy. I love it, and my younger self can't believe it.
There's someone I want to introduce you to. The kindest, gentlest man I've ever met.
Lloyd! Lloyd! Huh?
I think my favorite part of Batman Forever is just this cop's bad acting right at the start of the movie. This is a Batman movie. You pretty much know the storyline. Bruce Wayne is a billionaire and a secret superhero for Gotham City at night. I like Michael Keaton's Batman way more than Val Kilmer's. Jim Carrey is a scientist at Wayne Enterprises, I think that's what it's called, and has been testing mind control, which gets shut down as soon as Bruce Wayne finds out about it. So he stages a suicide on his coworker, leaves a riddle behind.
Yep, definitely suicide. Thanks very much for your help, Bruce.
And he starts plotting further revenge on Bruce Wayne as he becomes
The Riddler.
Robin is also introduced in this movie. And the movie would just be way better if he wasn't. Almost every scene of his until the end has nothing to do with the rest of the movie, let alone being unbelievably cringe. I think there's also too much romance with Nicole Kidman. Her character basically falls in love with Batman at the beginning of the movie, so she turns down Bruce Wayne, only to fall in love with Bruce Wayne and then turn down Batman. Pretty much every scene in the movie without Jim Carrey or Tommy Lee Jones, I just think is boring. Except that hilarious cop. Anyway, the Riddler basically invents the internet. Gotham gets addicted to it, and all of its users' data gets sent straight to the Riddler. Jim Carrey is easily the best part of the movie, although his take on the Riddler is basically just a less cartoony version of the Mask. Yeah, I just don't think this movie's worth watching, but it's not horrible, especially if you're a Batman fan, except Robin. Robin is horrible. Ace Ventura 2, When Nature Calls, has to be the most pointless movie I've ever seen. It's confusing to me because it only came out a year after the first movie, so I don't get why it feels so far removed. I don't like the first movie very much, but at least it's got some heart and some character to it, but there's just literally nothing going on in this movie.
Alrighty then.
For real, I can barely tell you what's going on plot-wise. Jim Carrey now lives with some monks in a jungle temple, but that literally doesn't matter because he just gets kicked out 10 minutes into the movie. So he gets hired as a pet detective again and has to search the African jungles for the great white bat, and he stops another bad guy. I literally only laughed at this one thing in the whole movie, and it's not even funny. Jim Carrey's other bad movies are usually at least entertaining, but this one's just boring, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. In The Cable Guy, it's Ferris Bueller's big day off, and he's trying to watch TV, but the cable's not working. His friend, Jack Black, tells him to slip the cable guy $50, and he'll get hooked up with every channel. This movie kind of feels like an Adam Sandler movie to me, not in a bad way, but that might just be because of Jim Carrey, the cable guy's list.
I'm kind of a perfectionist. Perfectionist.
Have you ever been a little too nice to someone you thought was weird, only for them to now think you're best friends? That's Jim Carrey after being asked to wire all the channels.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
And he slowly worms his way into every aspect of his new buddy's life. Anytime the TV is on, there's a really fun subplot going on with Ben Stiller's characters, the child star actor twins, Sam and Stan Sweet. Actually, they kind of remind me of something.
Life wasn't sweet after the cancellation of their program.
Back to the main characters. The entire medieval times section is hilarious. And I also love how Jim Carrey's like bigger and stronger than everyone else during basketball. This movie is weird and sad and dark, but still hilarious. It is one of Jim Carrey's better movies, and it's one of the only times it's not necessarily because of him. He's great in the role. I'm not suggesting it would be better with someone else cast. I think it probably wouldn't be worse. Everyone's just so good in this movie, especially Owen Wilson.
You're sexy.
What?
You heard me.
By the way, my dad used to say this to me basically every morning when I'd wake up.
Good morning, Mary Sunshine. And how are we today?
I think Liar Liar is probably Jim Carrey's funniest movie. It's an interesting case here because if I try to imagine anyone else playing the lead role, the movie kind of falls apart and I don't even really think it'd be funny. It would feel really different and it would become such a generic comedy, I think it'd be forgettable.
I've had better.
There's the perfect mix of serious, believable lawyer acting that he would start to do more often going forward, and the goofy, over-the-top physical comedy that he was known for up until this point. It doesn't matter how ridiculous he gets, even if he's in the middle of his boss's meeting or the courtroom. It never feels like too much because you fully believe that he's fighting himself so hard from telling the truth. The perfect example of this is when he fights his arm. Jim Carrey is a divorced dad lawyer that's built his career and entire life around his lies. His poor son is sick of being lied to and having his dad break every promise he makes. So for his birthday, he wishes that Jim Carrey won't be able to lie for the entire day. Of course, this also happens to be the day of a big sex scandal trial that Jim Carrey can only win by lying. The way some of the lines are delivered in this movie will be in my head till the day I die.
I can't lie!
Yeah, I think this is one of Jim Carrey's best, funniest performances ever, but all of the other actors are great too, especially Cary Elwes doing the Claw. This interaction with Jennifer Tilly always kills me.
Ding, ding, ding! What do we have for her, Johnny?
Her and Greta are hilarious. Any problems this movie has are just so easy to ignore because I'm too busy laughing the whole time. The end credits of the movie are also just a bunch of bloopers, which is really fun. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to find out that my girlfriend had never even heard of The Truman Show, so I immediately threw it on without telling her anything about it, just like I'd done with my sisters a few years before that. If you're like them and have somehow never heard of The Truman Show, please stop watching this until you have. I'm gonna spoil like the whole thing. You can't really talk about it without spoiling it. It's one of my favorite things to watch someone along for the ride with Truman as they discover the nature of the world he lives in. And it all works especially well because of Jim Carrey's performance. He's so endearing and lovable as Truman. When his wife tries to read him an ad, it's almost cathartic the way he delivers this line.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
It's just perfect. His wife, Meryl, is also incredible. She's so good at being hateable. It's kind of disturbing to me how she's like visibly more comfortable around everyone except Truman. And when she says this,
To carry on under these conditions, it's unprofessional!
she means it. This is her last scene of the movie. Her character really quits. I always wondered what all the actors do in their real lives. Some of them obviously have to spend most of their life on set. I found this in-world documentary explaining how they're all some of the richest people on the planet now, but they can't really do anything with their money because their lives become the Truman Show.
It isn't a matter of it influencing my life. It is my life.
The best part of this little documentary is the reveal that they're building a Fiji set for Truman to escape to. This movie's just genius. It's got everything you could want in a movie. It's profound, relatable, tragic, wholesome. It's feel good and funny, but also equally unsettling and existentially dark. It could easily have been over 2 hours. It's crazy how much is packed into an hour and 45 minutes. I'm sure everyone feels something similar at some point in their life. I definitely remember feeling like my life is some weird stage and the people around me I haven't met yet are just waiting for their scene. Paul Giamatti is the GOAT, like usual, and it's his incompetence that is actually the catalyst for Truman's escape. He's the real secret hero of the movie. The ending of the movie is so sad, yet so inspiring. It honestly gets me choked up no matter how many times I've seen it. I think this is the movie that if it didn't star Jim Carrey, it would easily leave the biggest hole in his filmography. Before casting him, the director had Robin Williams in mind, and I just don't think it would work the same. That made me start trying to think of anyone else I think would work, but Jim Carrey is actually irreplaceable in this film. I really don't think anyone else could make Truman so relatable, so easy to root for, and just so real. Jim Carrey's actually only in the first and last few minutes of the movie, really. He's basically the adult version of Simon Birch's friend, who's looking back on and narrating their lives together. He has a couple lines of dialogue sprinkled throughout, but not very much. Anyway, Simon Birch has dwarfism, he loves baseball, and he loves girls.
She's so sexy that sometimes I forget she's someone's mother. Hey, okay.
Seriously, this kid's so horny.
Maybe she'll let us touch her someday. We paid her.
The movie's basically just one massive guilt trip, trying to make you feel bad for Simon. Everyone in the movie is just horrible to him, except Jim Carrey's family. I remember going to a friend's house as a kid, and his family put on Simon Birch and made us watch it with them, so I kind of have strange memories of it. I remember just thinking the whole time as a kid, why are we watching this? It's been established that Simon sucks at baseball. Only like a third of the way through the movie, he finally hits his first ever pitch, and it literally kills young Jim Carrey's mom.
She's dead.
Who's, like I said, one of the only people nice to him. And then Simon literally dies when his school bus crashes. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it. I don't like this movie at all. Man on the Moon is a biographical movie about Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman is basically the OG anti-comedian, and probably one of the most interesting people ever. The bit that opens up the movie is a perfect representation of his style. Coming on stage pretending to be a foreigner, doing terrible impressions to get the audience uncomfortable, before slowly revealing his flawless Elvis impersonation. His most famous was his SNL Mighty Mouse bit. It's awesome to me that Jim Carrey referenced it in Liar Liar just a few years before this.
Here she comes to wreck the day!
Tony Clifton is Andy Kaufman's hilarious alter ego who causes mayhem for everyone, including Andy, telling everyone he's sensitive to smoke and won't come on stage until everyone puts out their cigarette. Just to come out smoking is hilarious. He's the type of comedian that just wanted to be 2 steps ahead of his audience. He never really wanted them in on the joke. Paul Giamatti is the greatest actor to ever live. I barely even recognized him until he took off his genius disguise.
Don't believe everything you hear, George.
Jim Carrey just kills it as Andy Kaufman. They don't even look similar, but there's a point in the movie where I kind of forget I'm even watching Jim Carrey. He just becomes Andy Kaufman. His blurring of the line between reality and jokes make it hard for anyone to take him serious. Even his friends and family don't believe it and laugh. when he tells them he has lung cancer. It's genuinely heartbreaking. But hey, at least Tony Clifton's doing okay.
I am getting stronger and stronger.
Me, Myself, and Irene is a really strange mixed bag of a movie. On the one side, it's hilarious and filled with some of Jim Carrey's wildest moments. But on the other side, the plot itself is so lacking, it's almost incoherent. Jim Carrey is a Rhode Island state trooper. And by the way, I had to look up if they actually dress like this, because it's kind of insane. And yeah, they do. And do you remember that cop from Dumb and Dumber? Yeah, that movie's also set in Rhode Island, but the cop just looks normal. I thought it was interesting. Anyways, Jim Carrey is Charlie, a naive pushover, and on the day of their wedding, his new wife cheats on him with their black limo driver. She doesn't stop seeing this man, which Jim Carrey stays in denial about, even when his wife has a black baby. 3 black babies. This scene of his kids wanting to watch Richard Pryor is so funny.
Can we watch Richard Pryor on HBO?
Richard Pryor.
Not them kind you be fucking with in the zoo.
He's finally clued in only when his wife actually admits to having an affair and leaves him.
Just said you'd eat whale blubber.
She'll be eating blubber all right, just as soon as I free will it.
Leading to Jim Carrey's nice guy breaking point. Introducing Hank, his split personality, who is everything Charlie wasn't. So the split personalities are tasked with escorting this criminal girl Irene to some other county or something, but Hank's insanity causes them to go off course and end up on the run from the rest of the police force. Look at how cheap gas is. Yeah, this is basically the rest of the movie. Just random funny scenes of his personalities fighting, his 3 black sons trying to rescue him as they get followed around by cops and kinda fall in love. The only thing that really happens between them is Hank pretending to be Charlie to innocently sleep in the same bed as Irene so that he can actually have sex with her all night. The movie honestly feels unfinished, but a lot of it still had me busting up laughing. It's really a movie with just as much multiple personality disorder as its main character. I consider How the Grinch Stole Christmas to be a certified Christmas classic. Of course, it's based on the Dr. Seuss book and cartoon of the same name, and honestly, I think it's a perfectly done adaptation. It just looks and feels so true to the original, down to the sets, the casting, and even the retelling of the story. It hits on all the story beats and expands on them in wacky and hilarious ways. I feel like especially the mailroom looks straight out of the cartoon, and I love the Grinch's weird lore of being bullied by the racist 2 children. They literally exile him to their trash dump. Jim Carrey is just way too perfect as the Grinch. Look at that smile. Some of his most quotable moments ever come from this movie. So instead of showing you those, I want to show you some moments that I think go overlooked.
This is not pudding.
What? Hey, honey, our baby's here. He looks just like your boss. You're evil.
One thing I've always wondered about in this version of Whoville is what they do all year when it's not Christmas. The cartoon really shows them setting up the town in preparation for Christmas, but in this movie I can't really imagine the town looking any other way. It seems like their entire culture and society revolves around Christmas. Yeah, I love this movie. I don't know how it turned out so good. It could have easily turned out just like The Cat in the Hat. I'll be watching this every few years for Christmas for the rest of my life. The Majestic is an amazing movie. This is far and away Jim Carrey's most underrated film, and I think it's also his best romance movie. I love old school golden age Hollywood vibes, and The Majestic makes me feel like I'm experiencing cinema as it was in the 50s. It makes me nostalgic for a time that I'll never experience. A much simpler time when pop culture itself was kinda just getting started. This movie's got some great twists and turns. Multiple times my girlfriend and I thought we had it figured out just for something to happen that made made us rethink everything. I'm not really going to get into the plot because, first off, there's just a lot to it, but mainly because I think this movie's just worth experiencing for yourself. I don't want to give anything away. Jim Carrey's basically a screenwriter in 1950s Hollywood, and his first movie is about to come out.
No, I'm the B movie tonight. Sand Pirates of the Sahara.
They actually show parts of this black and white movie within the movie, and it's really well done. The beating heart of this film is the Majestic itself, a beautiful old cinema in dire need of repair. The only negative thing I can really say about this movie is more of a nitpick. During lots of the movie, there's these big gathering crowds that are really loud, but get unbelievably quiet as soon as Jim Carrey starts monologuing. I love this movie. Go watch it. In Bruce Almighty, Jim Carrey is a wannabe news anchor who crashes out on live TV after the job of news anchor is given to Michael Scott instead.
Hey, Wacky Bruce!
So he goes home and continues to freak out at his girlfriend too. Crashing his car leads him so frustrated that he goes on a huge tirade against God, and God actually decides to answer him with a phone call.
Sorry.
But Jim Carrey, of course, declines the call because he doesn't have caller ID and doesn't know who it is. But the number doesn't stop calling, and eventually he answers. He's given an address to an all-white warehouse being cleaned up by Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman asks for some help, and Jim Carrey sarcastically promises that he will help him one day in the future in exchange for directions. And the directions lead him to another floor of the warehouse where Jim Carrey runs into none other than Morgan Freeman, who now reveals himself to be God.
I'm God.
Naturally, God decides to give Jim Carrey all of his powers, like turning into Clint Eastwood or parting traffic, and he uses the powers to turn his life back around, get the girl and get his job back. Honestly, I like Evan Almighty better. I think this movie's kind of boring, and it was one of the ones I was more excited to watch. I think the best part of the movie is the payoff when Jim Carrey comes back at the end to find God, and it's accidentally exactly when he promised earlier in the movie, so he helps God mop the floor.
Alrighty then.
My girlfriend was also super excited to watch this with me because it was one of her favorites growing up, but she was just disappointed as well. Yeah, the movie's fine, it's not bad, but... Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a really crazy movie. The story is told in this trippy, non-linear way, so if me talking about it seems confusing, it's to avoid kind of spoiling that structure. Basically, Jim Carrey decides he wants to get back together with his ex, Clementine, because he's getting depressed that it's about to be Valentine's Day. Then he sees her kissing Frodo and finds out that she went to a memory erasure clinic and doesn't remember anything about him. Jim Carrey's heartbroken, so he decides to go to the same company and get his memories erased as well. And this is where the movie starts to get really surreal as he has to relive his memories to erase them. And it kind of reminds me of Inception, the way he doesn't know if he's in reality or in a memory. Sometimes he's living through the memory, sometimes he's watching it happen, sometimes Clementine is even also aware that it's not real and helps him act through the scene.
Get back under the table.
Scream.
No, and not until after,
And back in reality, Frodo and the Hulk invite Kristen Dunst over to drink, smoke, and party literally on top of Jim Carrey's body. And Frodo's been using the memory machine to alter Clementine's memories and implant himself inside of them. Also, Kristen Dunst cheats with the CEO of the company, who then admits to her that they've cheated many times and he just keeps erasing her memory. Yeah, everyone in this movie is horrible, but Jim Carrey still finds a way to make me laugh.
You're not a stalker or anything, right?
You're the one that talked to me, remember?
That is the oldest trick in the stalker book.
There's a stalker book.
Probably my favorite thing about the movie is the way it's shot. Look at this steezy transition out of the library. I'm not going to pretend like I really understood this movie. I only watched it once. But I'd like to say I think the point of it is being stuck in a toxic relationship and continuing to go back to that person. The entire film is just beautiful. I loved the series of Unfortunate Events books when I was a kid. I remember being so excited for this movie, and even back then as a 7-year-old, I just remember being disappointed by it. It's about these 3 kids from a rich family whose house burns down, killing their parents with it. In the ruins of the house, they find this spyglass that starts teasing at a family conspiracy of some kind, and I think it would actually be really cool if it amounted to anything. Anyways, for some reason they get sent to their way distant cousin to be taken care of, the comically evil Count Olaf. He lives in a weird Tim Burton-esque house and is after the kid's fortune. Jim Carrey here being a dinosaur is one of my favorite things. Also, I don't know how to describe it, but this kid is like both overacting and underacting at the same time.
Home is where your parents put you to bed at night. This is not home. How could they do this?
So Jim Carrey tries to get the kids killed, and when it fails, he's caught and gets them taken away. The rest of the movie is basically him following them around, disguising himself, and continuing to try to kill them. This disguise is the funniest.
Do you have an experience with children?
Children are strange and foreign to me. I never really was one.
So that whole family conspiracy I mentioned earlier is finally revealed at the end of the movie when the kids are given their own spyglass and told that all the unfortunate events that happened to them were actually fortunate because at least they have each other. What? Yeah, I think this movie is okay at best. From what I remember, the books are way better, but I haven't read them since elementary school. It's really just another movie where Jim Carrey is the only reason to watch, and he doesn't carry it hard enough this time. I didn't really know anything about Fun with Dick and Jane. Honestly, I thought it was a generic romance or rom-com movie, but it's actually like a heist movie. It's super fun and funny and has aged like Neville Longbottom. Jim Carrey works at a parody company of Enron, the notorious fraud company, and just like the real employees, he loses all of his savings as the company goes bankrupt. Jim Carrey and his wife have trouble looking for work as Darude Sandstorm plays in this weird montage. Honestly, I wish there was this few competition nowadays when looking for a job. It's just gotten worse. As their struggle gets worse, they're saving money wherever they can, and they start having to sell off all their belongings. And after selling literally everything, they have nothing left, and they start robbing places. They're way too polite.
Are they non-fat muffins? I think so. Okay. These are non-fat muffins. Get some of those.
And this is basically when the movie takes a turn as they're sick of their situation and plot a revenge heist on the executives of Enron. Jim Carrey's maid's accent is so funny.
I would do anything for him, Mr. Retard.
Yeah, this movie's awesome. It's short and sweet. The number 23 thinks it's really clever. The movie's trying way too hard to be subtle and complex. You can tell the creators really thought it was gonna blow people's minds with all the twists and turns and top secrets. But it just doesn't work. Honestly, it's super whack. Jim Carrey and his wife find a book that intrigues them, all about the secrets of the number 23. And as he reads it, Jim Carrey starts to get creeped out because he thinks the book is about his life. He becomes obsessed with the number 23. He starts seeing patterns of it everywhere. This movie's just cringe. I think it would have been a much better direction for this story to take it less seriously. The concept of being obsessed with a number and having it control your life because you're seeing it everywhere could be really fun, but it's just executed terribly. Jim Carrey is sometimes thinking his thoughts out loud with a voiceover like the old Dune movie.
Suicide Blonde tells me she was a good person once.
Some of the shots in the movie are kind of cool. That's basically all I can give the movie. Even the name of the detective, Fingerling. It's so stupid, but the movie thinks it's good.
That's a cool name.
Yeah.
This movie just sucks. Horton Hears a Who is another Dr. Seuss Jim Carrey movie, this time animated, of course. I'm just a sucker for Dr. Seuss. I think this movie's awesome, and I remember loving it as a kid, so I was kind of expecting to be disappointed. But no, Jim Carrey is great as Horton, so are the rest of the voice actors. This cast is crazy stacked. So Horton's an elephant that finds a speck of dust that he wants to protect because he hears voices coming from it, and those voices belong to the tiny town of Whoville. So I guess this is what the Who's are like when it's not Christmas. I never really picked up on this being the same Whoville that the Grinch terrorizes, but I guess it must be. So Horton is on a quest through the jungle to protect the city that lives on this tiny speck of dust. It's very cute, and it's got great messaging for kids about believing in yourself when no one else will. The 3D animation is fine, it looks pretty good, but I really wish the whole movie was in this style that it switches to for a second, or at least that the other Who sections were in this style. It looks so much better. Then there's another part of the movie where it switches to an anime style, and it's really well done. This movie also loves the word boob.
Blathering boob. Called a boob. Call me a boob? He's a boob. I would never call somebody a boob.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say. It's an awesome kids movie. I always felt like Yes Man and Liar Liar were basically the same movie, but they're actually pretty different. I think they really only feel so similar because of their main gimmick being a life-changing, character-altering paradigm shift. But actually, most of his movies kind of have this. Specifically, The Mask, Me, Myself, and Irene, Bruce Almighty, and Fun with Dick and Jane. Even some others too. Liar Liar and Yes Man are just even more specifically about restricting his speech. Anyways, Jim Carrey's friends are sick of him staying alone and depressed inside after a breakup. One of his friends, by the way, is Danny Masterson, who's playing a less creepy version of himself. One of his other friends brings him to a cult-like motivational speaker seminar where no one is allowed to say no. So after, when a homeless man asks him for a ride, he now has to say yes. Okay, that's actually straight out of Liar Liar. His elderly neighbor comes on to him. When he turns her down, he almost dies and realizes he has to say yes to everything. But it starts changing his life for the better. He starts learning all these hobbies that lead to these fun little payoff moments later on, and also starts killing it at work. Jim Carrey's boss is pretty much Michael Scott. It's hilarious when Jim Carrey has to say yes to his Harry Potter party. The most important yes of the movie happens when he accepts a flyer for a local band, Munchausen by proxy, which is a great name. It's actually kind of a real band. It's a real-life girl group collaborating with Zooey Deschanel as the lead singer. Honestly, the band's kind of awesome. It's funny and self-aware. Yeah, this is a romance movie. The rest of the movie is basically about Zooey Deschanel and Jim Carrey falling in love thanks to his new outgoing attitude. Yes Man's a little derivative, but it's still just really good. There's just a lot to like here, I think. It's genuinely sweet and fun, and I could even see it inspiring someone that's down on their luck. I Love You, Phillip Morris is really, really good. I honestly didn't think I was gonna like it very much, but actually it's easily one of Jim Carrey's best serious roles, and it's still pretty hilarious too. Jim Carrey's basically in an unfulfilled marriage because he's secretly a gay man. To support his expensive gay lifestyle, he becomes a credit fraudster until he gets caught and put into jail. That's where he meets Phillip Morris, played by Ewan McGregor, and they fall in love. So when Jim Carrey gets released from prison, he pretends to be a lawyer representing Ewan McGregor so that they can continue to be around each other. He also lies his way into a CFO position at a big health company, and that makes them crazy rich. This is kind of the point in the movie when my girlfriend and I thought things were getting too absurd to be realistic, as they're living this wealthy lifestyle, and he even starts embezzling from the company. I found it so dumb to push your luck that hard and start embezzling when you already were unqualified for the job. So yeah, we kind of thought the movie was unbelievable, and imagine our surprise when at the end of the movie it's revealed that this is all based on a true story. Jim Carrey's character and Phillip Morris are real, making what we thought an unbelievable story truly fascinating. So everyone knows the story of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, but in a way, that's actually what makes me sad about it. Everyone knows Scrooge. Everyone knows that he's a bad guy. Everyone knows that he's miserable and lonely and that it's all his own greedy fault. Does that stop anyone in real life from acting exactly like him? Scrooge is wealthy, but he's not a billionaire. He's not worse than the rich people in our reality. He actually just wants to be left alone. And while he does resent the poor, at least he's not actively trying to harm them, like what happens nowadays. Let me get on to the movie itself.
Yes!
It's technically very good looking, but I hate the art style. The humans look just creepy, I only like the way the movie looks when there's no faces on screen. I don't know, I don't really have anything more to say about this movie. There are much better adaptations of Christmas Carol out there. Greed is depressing. Oh, I didn't even bring up Jim Carrey. He's great as Scrooge. I barely even noticed it was his voice unless I was trying to.
And
Mr. Popper's Penguins is decent enough for what it is, which is a movie for children. To me, it feels kind of like a hybrid between Liar Liar and Night at the Museum with a little sprinkling of Elf in the mix. Jim Carrey's dad is a famous explorer, and he sends Jim Carrey a souvenir from his travels, a live penguin. He tries to send the penguin back, but accidentally orders 5 more instead.
saying a penguin! I told you 5 times I have to send the penguin. 5 times saying a penguin.
The penguins look pretty good, actually. There were only a few moments I thought the CGI was too distracting. Jim Carrey's a divorced dad with a kinda rocky relationship with his kids, and they end up loving the penguins, so he decides to keep them and use them to bond with his family. So I know it's a kids movie, but the writing is way too convenient. It's pretty weak. Things just kinda happen or don't happen depending on what the plot needs. It rarely feels natural. Just for example, the letter that came with the first penguin gets lost just so that Jim Carrey can find it when he'll actually appreciate it. The entire floor of his apartment was just covered in snow for at least a week, but I'm supposed to believe the envelope went unnoticed and undamaged. This movie should be called Mr. MacGuffin's Penguins. The incredible Burt Wonderstone should be talked about more often. I found it so funny, the cast is awesome, and I don't understand why I've never heard of it. I feel like it's totally just Zoolander with magicians. So in a world where basically everyone has seen Zoolander, I don't get why everyone hasn't seen Burt Wonderstone. Steve Carell is your typical Penn and Teller type, rabbit in a hat, card trick magician with his own show in Las Vegas. Also from the movie poster, I couldn't tell it was Steve Carell. I literally thought it was Fabio. And when Jim Carrey, a David Blaine, Chris Angel type magician, starts getting famous, Burt Wonderstone gets jealous and tries to put on a crazy show to compete with him, but he makes a fool of himself and ruins his career. His sidekick Steve Buscemi runs off to Cambodia and tries to get the locals there hooked on magic instead of kratom. This is just an awesome movie. I think it's super underrated. And Jim Carrey is actually not my favorite part for once. Steve Carell is just too good. He's like out of touch rich, but still completely classless at the same time. But Jim Carrey does still have probably my favorite scene in the movie. His ultimate trick, which is just drilling a hole in his head. Kick-Ass 2 might be the worst movie I've ever seen. It's incredibly derivative of superheroes in general, but does nothing new with the idea, unless you count sex jokes and swearing, I guess. Do people actually like this? A bunch of high school superheroes saving the world together while having to hide their identities from their parents and other schoolmates. Just feels pointless. About 5 minutes into the movie, McLovin kills his mom while she's in her tanning bed. And it upsets him so much, he decides to become a BDSM supervillain. Everyone in this movie has the worst super character names I've ever heard. I think Kick-Ass looks so stupid in his outfit. He looks more like he's about to start pressure washing my house. I will say that the cast is pretty stacked, and all the talent is just wasted here. So Jim Carrey plays Colonel Stars and Stripes, a drill sergeant type who leads a sort of rebellion group of other just as lame superheroes. These rebels team together with Kick-Ass and they all interrogate this mob boss dude. I don't really know why it's happening, but Jim Carrey pulls a gun out on him and it makes the rest of the cast react like this, and immediately I knew the gun wouldn't be loaded. Everything's just so cliche. Halfway through the movie, McLovin tries to force himself onto one of the Supergirls he has captured, but he can't get hard, so she just kinda laughs at him.
Hurt her. Bad.
And Jim Carrey just gets killed off from the movie around here. Kick-Ass's best friend turns evil and is the reason the bad guys know where he is. It's just tropes on tropes. Kick-Ass's dad, who even looks like Uncle Ben, gets killed and Kick-Ass blames himself. Literally the only thing in the whole movie that I thought was kinda cool was the scene at his dad's funeral that they turned into a shootout. I haven't even mentioned Chloe Grace Moritz, and I don't really want to. She's part of this Mean Girls. It's not even a subplot. It's just like a bad Mean Girls movie stitched in every couple minutes. It literally doesn't relate to the rest of the movie and is by far the worst and most cringe part. Before watching Dumb and Dumber 2, I was kind of forming a theory in my head that the reason I never liked the first one as a kid is because I'd seen the second one and was confusing them, so I expected this movie to suck. But I was wrong again. I've definitely never seen this movie, and I found it hilarious. Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are idiots again, going on a road trip again. This time for a more convoluted reason. It's really not that important. They're being tracked down again by some bad guys that are trying to kill them, and they're too stupid to fall for the tricks. I love this Spec Ops agent's disguise. It's so funny. It reminds me of Joe Gatto. The main villain is played by Jim Carrey's love interest from the Majestic, and in both movies her name is Adele, and that's not the actress's name, so it's confusing to me. Are they supposed to be the same character? Is it a reference? Is it just a coincidence? So I think it's kind of fun to pretend that she is just the same character, although that also kind of ruins the Majestic. But yeah, for a sequel that's 20 years newer than the original, I'm surprised how good it is and how much it feels like a sequel. I don't have anything to say about these jokes, I just have to show them to you.
Save my daughter. Bone her like a chicken cutlet. You hear me?
I'm sorry, your name is... I'm his associate, Dr. Christmas. Ah, Christmas like the holiday. No, like the tree.
The Bad Batch is a pretty dope movie, or at least I was thinking that for the first half of the movie. It's like a post-apocalyptic wasteland society of cannibals, where the only place you won't be eaten alive is in the safe town of Comfort. Everyone here does drugs and hangs out at raves. It reminds me of a video game. It almost feels like a Hitman level taking place inside the Fallout universe or something. Anyways, the main girl had her arm and leg eaten, so she wants to get revenge and also find some WD-40 for her loud, squeaky mechanical leg. I don't know, this movie has a really good vibe and I like the setup, but the second half of the movie gets so boring and every scene just starts to drag on and on. This shouldn't be 2 hours long. It'd be a lot better with tighter scenes and being shortened to like 90 minutes. At least that's what I thought until the end of the movie, when I realized it wouldn't really matter or be any better, because this is like the worst ending to a movie I've ever seen. It completely ruined the movie. I'm just gonna spoil it for you because this isn't worth watching. The main girl falls in love with Jason Momoa, the cannibal that ate her, and she betrays the safe town to try to get with him. This is another movie where Jim Carrey is the best part, but this time it's actually because he's the most interesting character. He's Herman Toothrot, but with no dialogue. If you're interested in this movie, watch the first half until she takes acid, and then just make up your own ending. I'm not kidding. Dark Crimes is a horrible movie, not even just in a bad way. That doesn't mean it's good though. Jim Carrey's a Polish detective working on a case to find the man that murdered a hooker working in this messed up Sallow-esque brothel called The Cage. And he basically becomes as corrupt as the people he's going after. He ruins his marriage, he gets an innocent man put in prison. This is like a worse, more disturbing version of Zodiac. My favorite part of the movie was easily the shot of the vending machine, because it made me think of the Spec Ops agent from Dumb and Dumber 2 again, and brightened up this dark movie a little bit. It's one of only 45 movies on Rotten Tomatoes that has a 0%, and I still don't think this is even his worst movie. That alone should tell you how bad I think Ace Ventura 2 and Kick-Ass 2 are. It's not as pointless or cringe as either one of those, but I'd rather watch Simon Birch or The Number 12 2023, barely. It's far too bleak to be enjoyable. I like bleak movies. Apocalypse Now is one of my favorites. This is a bad movie for sure. Sonic the Hedgehog is a surprisingly impressive movie, especially for a video game adaptation, which there are so few good ones, and this is easily one of the best. Jim Carrey is just perfect as Eggman. Before watching, I had a hard time picturing him in the role, and I think part of that is just that Eggman is supposed to be fat, but now actually I can't imagine anyone else doing it. The story itself is kind of weird. Sonic's not really the hero. He actually has to get saved by this random cop named Donut Lord that Sonic kind of falls in love with. Not in a romantic way, but like a father-son thing. I really like what they did with Sonic's rings. Sonic is like on the run between worlds, and if he throws a ring, it turns into a portal. It's a clever way to make them necessary and useful. I hope the next two movies are set in cities more often. All the parts in San Francisco genuinely felt like the games, and they made me want to watch Sonic X, which is a Sonic cartoon I grew up watching. So yeah, I enjoyed the movie, but Jim carries it really hard. I think he levels it up from a good video game adaptation to something genuinely worth watching. I laughed almost every time he was on screen, but also hardly at all when he wasn't. The exceptions, though, are Crazy Carl and his Sonic drawing, and all of the stupid Olive Garden jokes. I know it's product placement, but I don't know, it's just funny. On to Sonic 2. I really wish they called this movie Sonic the Hedgehog 2 plus Knuckles. This movie's less funny, less fun, and somehow feels less Sonic-y than the first, despite the fact Knuckles and Tails are in this one, and the Chaos Emeralds and Super Sonic and stuff. The music selection is horribly cringe, just random dated pop songs thrown in just because you'll recognize them. The plot is really dumb too. Sonic uses his rings to send Donut Lord to a wedding and gives him a ring to get back with, so immediately I knew that ring was gonna get mixed up with the wedding ring. I could legitimately see myself wanting to rewatch the first movie one day, but I'll never rewatch this one after. That said, it's still better than your average video game adaptation, mostly due to Jim Carrey though. You can really just tell how much fun he has playing Eggman, especially in this movie. Apparently he's kind of just let loose, and most of his lines are even ad-libbed.
Earth is my turf, G.
And that really is the best decision that could have been made for him. He's just great. And his robot is pretty cool too.
I did some things, you did some things. There are good people on both sides.
That was clearly a reference to a certain American idiot. If you know, you know. Also, Idris Elba as Knuckles is like the most inspired casting.
I understand nothing of what you just said.
He is so perfect, I can hardly believe it. I just wish Knuckles was as hilariously dumb as he is in Sonic Boom. Okay, I was wrong. In Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Knuckles is just as stupid as he was in Sonic Boom, now that he's a good guy.
I have dishonored my marshmallow.
I guess he was only smart when he was evil? I love it. This movie, again, has a lot of random pop music injected all over the place. But this time around, at least, that's one of my only problems with the movie. This one's way better than 2. It feels so much like a Sonic movie. There's even a Chow Garden. Come on. Keanu Reeves is pretty awesome as Shadow. It's obviously not as genius as Idris Elba as Knuckles. I love that they give him a bike and a gun. I would have never expected that much faithfulness to the games. And this movie is actually really funny, and not only due to Jim Carrey, although he is still the best part. I mean, come on, when they introduce him, he's been watching soap operas. His sidekick was pretty funny in the other 2 movies, but in this one, he's almost as funny as Jim Carrey. Almost. The funniest scenes in the movie are literally all Jim Carrey acting side by side with old Jim Carrey. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with this movie again. The worst thing about it is the middle section of the movie that really does drag, especially after an awesome intro and before a good finale. The movie could have been shorter, and if it was, I think it would be even better than the first one. But honestly, because of how much I don't like the middle section and Shadow's backstory, I doubt I'll ever feel like watching this one again either. This was my first ever YouTube video, and I did it all myself. except for some help watching the movies from my beautiful girlfriend and my buddy who made the thumbnail. Yeah, if you somehow made it this far, you are an absolute legend. I appreciate it so much. Like and subscribe if you want to convince me that the work I put in was worth it. And leave a comment letting me know who you would like to see me tackle next.